On a sultry autumn afternoon, American soldier Jack Sullivan and his unit patrolled the arid hills near Jalalabad, Afghanistan, an area notorious for its instability and frequent attacks. The orders were clear: to acknowledge the presence of insurgents and ensure the safety of local routes. Jack, a young soldier with green eyes and brown hair, could hardly imagine how this day would forever alter the course of his life. Suddenly, a violent explosion cut the air. A landmine, hidden under the dry bush, detonated under one of the convoy's vehicles, throwing metal and flames in all directions. Chaos ensued as soldiers ran to form a defensive perimeter. Jack, trying to reach a wounded comrade, was hit by shrapnel and fell unconscious, hidden by smoke and confusion. When Jack regained consciousness, the night had already fallen. The distant sound of gunfire still echoed through the hills, but his body did not respond. Bleeding and alone, he tried to drag himself to safety, but the pain was unbearable. It was then that he heard cautious footsteps approaching. Fearing the worst, he could barely hold his gun. "Don't be afraid," said a soft voice in Pashto, which was quickly translated by the language app on Jack's device. A figure emerged from the shadows, a middle-aged man, with striking features and piercing eyes. His name was Amir, a local resident whose family lived in a nearby village, Khalid. Amir, seeing Jack's uniform, knew the risks, but his conviction was greater than fear. "You're safe with me now," he said, helping Jack get up. Jack could barely speak due to the pain, but managed to mutter a thank you. Amir rushed him to his modest home in Khalid, where his wife, Farah, and daughter, Layla, awaited him. Farah, a trained nurse before the war, took care of her wounds with skill and kindness, while Layla, with her young and curious brown eyes, watched silently. In the days that followed, as Jack slowly recovered under Amir's roof, he learned about the lives of those who had saved him. Amir often talked about the village, how the war had transformed everyone's lives and the daily challenges they faced. Despite the dangers, Amir and his family showed a strength and kindness that Jack had never seen before. "Why did you help me?" Jack asked one night as they shared a simple bread and dal dinner. Amir looked at him with a gentle seriousness. "On this earth, we learn that life is precious," he explained. "Even if you are a foreigner, you are a human being. And perhaps, by showing you kindness, we can change the hearts and minds of others." The conversation touched Jack deeply, who began to see his enemies through a new perspective. The bond that grew between him and Amir's family was a testimony to the power of compassion and shared humanity, even in times of relentless conflict. As Jack continued to recover, he knew that his stay in Khalid could not last forever. Eventually, his forces would find him, or he would have to come back on his own. But one thing was certain: he would never forget the debt of gratitude he owed to Amir and his family, who had saved him not only physically but also spiritually. This beginning of Jack's journey, marked by violence and transformed by unexpected goodness, set the stage for a deep questioning of war, friendship, and humanity. As Jack continued to recover, each day brought new conversations and new complex stories of mutual understanding. One afternoon, Amir led Jack to the top of a nearby hill, from where they could see the entire length of the village of Khalid, with its scattered mud houses and fields of golden wheat. "Look," said Amir, pointing to the various trails leading to the village. "Every path you see has been trodden for generations. Some bring traders, others bring soldiers. We don't choose who passes through our land, but we can choose how to receive them." Amir's words resonated with Jack as he looked at the peaceful landscape, so different from the images of war that brought him to this place. He realized that every interaction, every gesture of kindness was a form of resistance against the dehumanization so common in times of war. In the following days, Jack helped as he could in the village, from repairing damaged structures to teaching English to the children, among them Layla, who showed a special interest in the language and Jack's stories about his distant home in the United States. These simple daily activities strengthened the bonds between the soldier and the host community. One night, sitting with Amir's family under a starry sky, Jack shared stories of his family in Oklahoma, their hopes and dreams, and how the war had changed him. Farah, with the quiet wisdom that characterized her, told her, War changes us all, Jack, but what you decide to do after the war defines who you really are. As time passed, Jack's presence in Kalat began to become known. Amir, ever wary, knew this could bring trouble to both Jack and the village. With regret, they began to plan how Jack could safely return to his unit. It was a necessary risk, but one that Amir was willing to take to ensure the safety of the man he now considered a son. On the eve of his departure, the community gathered to bid Jack farewell. With teary eyes and trembling voices, they expressed their gratitude and hope that he would remember them as they would surely remember him. Jack, with a heavy heart for parting, but warmed by the love he had received, promised that he would return one day, not as a soldier, but as a friend. I will come back to help rebuild not only the houses, but also the lives that were affected by this war, he promised Amir and his family. You taught me about courage, not that of the battlefields, but the courage to be kind. I will take it with me forever. With this promise made and the dawn approaching, Jack departed Kalat under the protection of darkness, carrying with him the memories of a place that, although marked by war, had shown him the true essence of humanity. After Jack's exciting departure from the village of Kalat, he was reinstated to his unit, but the war within him was far from over. The shock and physical pain of his wounds could be medicated, but emotional scars required a different kind of healing. In his tent, on cold desert nights, memories of Amir, Farah, and Layla haunted him. Their kindness, so vivid against the backdrop of war, had become a mental refuge for Jack, a place to which his mind fled in search of peace. The following weeks were marked by a growing dilemma. With each mission, with each patrol over the same hills that almost cost him his life, Jack wondered about the meaning of that war. He saw the faces of the locals, marked by fear and mistrust, and remembered Amir's words about choosing how to receive those who passed through his land. He began to question not only his orders, but the motivations behind them. His heart, now heavy with the knowledge of humanity shared with his enemies, could no longer reconcile military duty with the empathy he had learned. Jack found a sympathetic ear in the unit's chaplain, Father Thomas, a middle-aged man whose serenity was a beacon in the chaos of war. During long walks around the base perimeter, Jack shared his experiences in Kalat. Father Thomas listened, his face shadowed by twilight, before speaking. Jack, war brings out the best and the worst in us, he said, his soft voice echoing in the desert wind. You have found a light in a very dark place. This is not something to be overlooked or ignored. Encouraged by these conversations, Jack began recording his experience. At first it was just a personal diary, but it soon turned into letters to Amir and his family. He wrote about his inner struggle, about the search for meaning in the midst of chaos. The letters were never sent, but served as a manifesto of his inner journey, a commitment to the promise he had made to return and help. Meanwhile, in Kalat, Amir kept Jack in his daily prayers. He and his family often gathered around the small radio, hearing news that could give them some information about the situation in the region where Jack might be. Their hope was simple but profound, that Jack would be safe and that he would keep his promise to return. Jack's internal conflict reached a peak when his unit was again ordered to advance on an offensive in an area near Kalat. As his comrades prepared, the prospect of potentially bringing destruction to the nearby village seemed an indescribable betrayal. The night before the mission, Jack made a life-changing decision. He sought his commander, a strict and focused man named Colonel Harris, to express his reservations. They found themselves under the canvas that served as an office, the light of a single hanging lamp illuminating the map between them. Colonel, I need to be honest. I know people in the area we're going to attack. They're civilians and they're good people. They are not our enemies, Jack began, his voice firm but charged with emotion. The colonel looked at him, his hard eyes not revealing his thoughts. After a long moment, he replied, Sullivan, you're a good soldier, but you're here to follow orders. We all have doubts, but we can't let that affect our judgment. Disappointed but not surprised, Jack withdrew, his decision clearer than ever. That night, while the base was sleeping, Jack drafted his transfer request to a non-combatant unit. He could no longer actively participate in the conflict that threatened the lives of the people he had promised to protect. It was a decision that isolated him from many of his companions, but for Jack, it was the only way to stay true to his principles. While awaiting approval of his transfer, Jack intensified his involvement in humanitarian aid projects within the base. He volunteered to work with organizations that assisted the displaced by the war, using his skills and his increasing fluency in Pashto to facilitate the distribution of food and medicine. This new function gave him a renewed purpose and showed him that even in the midst of war there was room for acts of compassion and reconstruction. News of his transfer arrived in a cold dawn. Jack packed his belongings, his heart relieved but heavy with the reality of leaving his companions behind. However, his determination to fulfill his promise to Amir and his family was stronger than any doubt. Before leaving, Jack visited Father Thomas to say goodbye. The chaplain hugged him, whispering words of encouragement. God does not call us to be heroes in great battles, Jack, but to be faithful in small things, in daily kindness. You found your mission. Follow it without fear. Arriving at his new unit, Jack came across a very different reality. Here, the struggle was not with weapons, but against scarcity, disease, and despair. Jack worked tirelessly, each day solidifying his belief that the real battle for peace was fought in hearts and minds, not on battlefields. Months passed, and the letters Jack wrote to Amir and his family piled up in his suitcase. Never sent, but always dear. He knew that sooner or later his journeys would reunite them again. Jack's experience in the non-combatant unit, though less physically dangerous, was equally challenging for his soul. He saw the impact of war on local communities, saw the resilience of civilians, and learned about the power of hope and recovery. This period reinforced his determination to return to Kalat, not only to meet those who had saved him, but to contribute significantly to the recovery of the region. Jack finally understood that while he could not change the past or end the war on his own, every small effort to help was a step toward a better future. He was ready to face the challenges that would come, armed not with a rifle, but with an unwavering faith in humanity and the goodness he had experienced in that small Afghan village. With this new perspective, he eagerly awaited the day he would fulfill his promise and return to Kalat. After months of working with the Humanitarian Assistance Unit and his transfer to an approaching civilian aid organization, Jack felt that his return to Kalat was finally within reach. As he prepared his departure, he reflected on the journey he had traveled, not just in miles, but in understanding and personal growth. He was ready to fulfill his promise to Amir and his family, a promise that was now at the heart of his life purpose. The dismissal of the military unit was more emotional than Jack expected. His colleagues, many of whom had observed his transformation from fighting soldier to humanitarian, offered him their respect and good wishes. Although some still did not fully understand his decision, they recognized the sincerity and conviction behind his actions. "You made a difference here, Jack," said Major Bennett, "your superior in the relief unit, not just in the lives you helped save, but in showing us that there are more ways to serve during a war than just fighting." With these words echoing in his mind, Jack embarked on the long flight back to Afghanistan, loaded with plans and designs to help rebuild Kalat. He had organized with his new organization to begin a development project in the region, focused on rebuilding essential infrastructure and providing education and medical care. Upon landing in Kabul, the reality of post-conflict Afghanistan hit him hard. The country was still healing its wounds, and instability remained in many areas. However, Jack's desire to make a difference strengthened his resolve. He spent a few days in the capital, coordinating with local partners and accumulating supplies before making the trip to Kalat. The journey was tense and full of reminiscences. Each curve of the road brought memories of that time when he was rescued and welcomed by Amir. When he finally arrived at the village, his heart was heavy with expectation and anxiety. He knew that much could have changed. Kalat was different. The marks of war were evident, with many houses rebuilt and others still in ruins. Jack went to Amir's house, nervousness growing with every step he took. As he approached, he saw a female figure at the entrance. It was Layla, now a young woman. Her eyes met, and for a moment time seemed to stop. "Jack?" Layla asked, a mixture of unbelief and joy in her voice. Yeah, that was him. The emotions overflowed as he embraced Layla, who called his mother and brothers to receive the friend they had thought they would never see again. Farah came to meet him, older and with his hair now speckled with ash. But his smile was as warm as he remembered. "Peace be with you, Jack. You're back," Farah said, with tears in his eyes. Jack spent the next few days rejoining the village. He shared his stories and heard theirs. Amir had died 2 years ago, a news story that struck Jack with deep pain. However, the strength and resilience of Amir's family inspired him even more. On a hot afternoon, Jack called a meeting with the village at the same place where Amir used to tell his stories. In front of a crowd of curious and hopeful faces, Jack talked about his plans to help rebuild Khaled. He explained how the organization he represented could provide resources, but that true reconstruction would come from the hands and hearts of the very inhabitants of Khaled. "Amir taught me that each of us can make a difference in someone else's life," Jack told the assembled crowd, his voice charged with emotion. "He saved my life and in doing so, showed me a path of compassion and resilience. Today, I'm here to honor your memory by keeping the promise I made. Together, we can rebuild not only the physical structures, but also the spirit of this community." The answer was a chorus of approval and gratitude. Many approached Jack after the speech, offering their hands and hearts for the work to come. They discussed ideas, priority sites for reconstruction, and ways to involve everyone in the village, especially young people. In the days that followed, Jack initiated reconstruction projects with the help of the community. They started by school, a place that Amir always said was the heart of the village, where children, including Layla, could learn and grow in safety and wisdom. Jack worked side by side with the villagers, teaching, learning, and laughing with them, while the walls of the school, once marked by war, were rebuilt. One night, as the sun set tinting the sky orange and pink, Layla sat next to Jack, looking at the nearly completed school. "You really came back," she said, a shy smile on her lips. "Many promise, but few fulfill. You're one of those few, Jack." These words touched Jack's heart deeply. He looked at Layla, seeing not only the girl who had once silently watched her recovery, but a strong and determined woman, much like her father. "Your family changed my life, Layla. Your courage and kindness gave me a new perspective. I just hope I can return a fraction of what I've received," he replied, his voice choked by emotion. In the months that followed, Jack not only helped rebuild the school, but also worked on irrigation projects to improve local agriculture and health programs to meet the medical needs of the community. With each project, the bond between Jack and Khaled strengthened, as did his connection to Amir's family. The evening before the inauguration of the reconstructed school was a celebration of hope and renewal. The entire village gathered, and Farah, alongside Jack, talked about the impact his presence and efforts had had on them. Amir has always believed that people can change the world around them, even with small gestures. "Jack, you are living proof of this," Farah said, handing Jack an embroidered scarf that belonged to Amir, symbolizing the transmission of responsibility and care. Jack accepted the gift, feeling the weight and warmth of the responsibility he now shared with this family and this village. He knew that although his promise was fulfilled, his work and his journey on Khaled were far from over. With the village and its inhabitants by his side, Jack was ready to continue the mission of reconstruction and healing, inspired by the memory of Amir and motivated by the love and respect he felt for everyone in Khaled. Years have passed since Jack made his promise to Amir and his family in Khaled. He had returned to Afghanistan not as a soldier, but as a man of peace, dedicated to repairing, rebuilding, and rejuvenating the life of that community that had welcomed him in his time of greatest need. With each project completed, with each life touched, Jack felt he was finally honoring the debt of gratitude he carried in his heart. The school in Khaled, now a vibrant and lively structure, was just the beginning. Under Jack's leadership and the continued support of the relief organization, the village saw significant improvements in its infrastructure. Roads were repaired, a new health center was established, and vocational training programs were started to ensure that the village's youth had opportunities to build a better future. Jack had moved permanently to Khaled. His home, modest but comfortable, was adorned with local tapestries and photos of the moments shared with Ammar's family and other villagers. Every corner of the house told the story of his journey from those uncertain early days to his current life, deeply intertwined with the community. On a particularly bright and sunny day, as Jack walked through the village, he reflected on the changes not only around him, but within himself. The war, once a series of battles and clashes, had turned into a struggle for peace and prosperity. He was interrupted in his thoughts by animated voices of children rushing to school, his laughter filling the air with a song that was sweet to his ears. Later that day, a special ceremony was planned to celebrate the inauguration of a new library at the school, an addition that Jack had worked hard to make a reality. The library was not just a place for books. It was a symbol of hope and a testament to the power of education. Layla, now a teacher at school, would be the chief librarian. As the ceremony began, Jack was among the many smiling faces who gathered in the schoolyard. Farah was at his side, sharing a look of mutual understanding and pride. Layla, in front of the crowd, began to talk about the impact of education on her own life and on community life. This library is more than a book room. It is a door to the world, a promise that our future will be bright and full of possibilities, said Layla, her firm voice full of emotion. And all this began with the kindness of a man who, despite being a foreigner, became one of us. Jack felt a lump form in his throat as he listened. When it was his turn to speak, he stood up, clearing his throat before starting. When I was lost and hurt, it was the kindness of a family in this village that saved me. He began, his voice trembling slightly with emotion. All I've done since was try to repay this act of generosity. Every brick in this library, every book on its shelves, is a testimony to our collective unity and strength. After the ceremony, as the children ran to explore the new library, Jack and Layla walked around the village together, reviewing future designs. They discussed plans to expand the health center and introduce more adult training programs, each step planned with community welfare in mind. As the sun began to set, dyeing the sky orange and purple, Jack looked at the mountains surrounding Khaled. He thought of Amir, wishing he could see what Khaled had become. In his heart, Jack knew that Amir was with him in spirit, guiding his decisions and strengthening his resolve. Amir always said that a man's true measure is not how he starts, but how he ends, Jack told Layla as they watched the horizon. I hope he's proud of what we started together here. Layla smiled, putting her hand on Jack's shoulder. He'd be more than proud, Jack. You helped turn pain and destruction into hope and growth. That's more than any of us could have asked for. As night fell, the village gathered for a community dinner at the school center. Laughter and conversation filled the air, a sweet melody of community and contentment. Jack sat among friends he now considered family, sharing meals prepared by the hands of those touched by the help he had brought. During dinner, Farah stood up and proposed a toast. Jack, who showed us that kindness and courage can come from anywhere, and that an act of compassion can change many lives. That we continue to build on the legacy he helped establish. Everyone lifted their glasses, and Jack felt humble and grateful. He reflected on his journey, from the lost and wounded soldier to the man he now saw before him, surrounded by grateful faces and warm hearts. He knew that his mission in Khaled would never really end. There would always be more to do, more lives to touch, more dreams to help accomplish. But that night, as the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Jack felt a deep satisfaction, knowing that every little effort had been worth it. With the night deepening and the children playing around, Jack walked to the edge of the village, looking at the stars. He thought about the future, about the legacy he was helping to build. And as the gentle night wind whispered through the hills, Jack felt a deep peace, knowing that somewhere up there, Amir was smiling at him. With this tranquility, he returned to the feast, ready to continue his life in Khaled, a life that was now as his own as that of that land and its people. If you liked this exciting story, help us by leaving your like and subscribing to our channel. Until the next story,